Just very quickly, I want you to get exposed a little bit to what the work is that we're starting on as of today. These are some of the programmatic considerations that we will have to take into the mix as we transform the Crystal Cathedral into a place that will support Catholic activity. We'll be taking a look at the plaza, how to make the cathedral the center of the campus as opposed to one of three buildings on a plaza. We will be looking at the narthex, the entries, how you gain entree into the cathedral, entry doors. We'll be looking at the tradition of the bishop's doors, which are the doors that only open when the bishop enters his cathedral for worship. We'll be looking at the baptistry, how to celebrate baptism to the fullest possible extent. Chapels of reconciliation. We'll be looking at a place for the catafalque, which is the place where the body of a loved one is brought for waking and prior to the funeral mass, for vigil keeping and so forth. By the way, on another project, I kept saying catafalque, and the chairman of the building was partly a hearing thing, but partly he just didn't have a big vocabulary, and he kept talking about the catapult. And if you can imagine putting a body on the catapult, it's a catafalque. Okay. We'll be talking about ambulatory spaces, processional aisles for full processions. We'll be talking about the sanctuary space per se, where the altar is, the ambo, the bishop's chair, and that sort of thing. We'll be talking about a chapel of reservation for the Blessed Sacrament, for worship of the Eucharist outside of the time of Mass. We'll be talking about, for want of a better term, the Lady Chapel. The Lady Chapel in traditional medieval cathedrals is usually the secondary liturgical space for smaller groups, but it's always dedicated to the Virgin. We'll be looking at devotional shrines. This becomes very important for the ethnic mix that you have here in Orange County. Every group comes out of their own experience of Christianity. They have their heroes, they have their martyrs, they have their devotions. If you don't provide places for the various ethnic groups, all of that can wind up right smack in the same spot, and that becomes problematic on a whole bunch of levels. Okay? So we got to provide for that. Organ and choir, as you most of you know, the organ's being rebuilt and then will be reinstalled. We'll be looking at the vesting sacristy, not only for Sundays and daily Mass, but also how do we accommodate, a couple hundred priests who come here for the Chrism Mass or some major diocesan event. We'll be looking at working sacristies. That's where the work of liturgical preparation happens, arranging flowers, getting the bread and wine ready, where vestments are stored, things like that. And we'll be looking at sound and lighting. Now, one of the big things we'll have to look at is approaches to seating. I'm just throwing these diagrams up to illustrate to you that there are many ways to skin a cat, as it were. I should not say that I have a cat at home. One obvious thing is you've got seating coming in three directions, so you say, well, let's put the altar in the middle. Then everybody is the closest to that. The only problem is the altar isn't the only thing. There's an ambo where the scriptures are read, and there's a presidential chair, there's the bishop's chair, and so forth. So this doesn't quite work. You can talk about antiphonal seating, which has lots of possibilities. The altar is in the center, the ambo is at one end, the bishop's chair is at the other, and then the balconies are all oriented in the same way that the floor is. Right now, the balconies aren't oriented the same as the floor. The central seating in the nave all faces forward, and then people in the peanut gallery, are facing in a perpendicular way. If you do something like this, a major issue all along is, I'm pushing the wrong button. Major issue all along is we're in a room, that's almost, 150, pushing 200 feet tall, and an altar is this tall. How do you bring the eye down to the altar? How do you bring the eye down to the most important place in the room? They are confronted with the same issue at St. Peter's in Rome. Who's been to St. Peter's? Okay, when you go there, it is Bernini's Baldacchino that basically brings the eye from all of that volume of space down to the papal altar. Now, this view of liturgy in St. Peter's in Rome is essentially the same thing as the last diagram that I just showed you. You have the altar in a central position. The baldacchino brings the focus down. So we have to use our imagination, and we just have to think of every possibility. So, okay, we're in the Crystal Cathedral. What is it like if there's some structure inside of the structure to bring your eye down? That's one possibility. Another problem is when you talk about the ambo and things like that. Excuse me, I'm skipping a spot. Up at the top, there is an opportunity under the choir for Eucharistic reservation. There could be a chapel there. This is another arrangement, which is kind of like what you have now, but it would be the traditional sanctuary. The problem that you're up against on this arrangement is competing with the organ. The advantage of the previous plan is that it pulls the focus away from one wall and brings it to the middle, and then the organ is just simply on the periphery. In this plan, everybody's facing one direction, and you could legitimately say, are we worshiping the organ or are we worshiping, God? So if that happened, then you would have to create some sort of a reredos behind the altar. So if you could imagine some sort of a screen or something like that. The challenge with that is the acoustical separation that could be created between the organ and the rest of the church. So all of these are ideas. They've all got their upside and their downside. That's the work of design development and schematic design. So the conclusion on this whole thing is we have been given, and I say we because I feel fully committed to this, we have been given a tremendous gift and a tremendous opportunity to build on the work and the labor and the generosity of others who, in this context now, were philanthropic, whether they knew it or not. They gave us a great gift. And it's our obligation to take this gift and deal with it as responsibly as we possibly can and to bring our own resources to it. It is a unique structure, and it's going to call for a unique approach and response. So this is not a case of where we can take a new wineskin, to quote the scriptures, and put old wine in it. You understand what I'm saying? We can't just come in and do the same old and just slap it inside. We've got to come up with a whole creative way of thinking about the structure and then doing something very beautiful and appropriate inside that will inspire and last. And as all of you know, when you build cathedrals, you don't do it for this generation. You're doing it for the next generation and after that. So you're to be congratulated. Welcome to the world of philanthropy, and welcome to this great project. So thank you, and thank you for letting me participate in it.